Okay, so there is my cue. First of all, thank you and welcome everyone to EHRC's webinar, Taking Care of Your Employees. Today's session, Caring for Your Hybrid Workforce, will introduce my very special guest speaker today, Victoria Miles from Vision Wheel. I'm Marie Mold, and I'm the Manager of Stakeholder Engagement here at Electricity Human Resources Canada. Before we begin, we acknowledge that the National Office of Electricity Human Resources Canada is located within the traditional, unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. EHRC honors the peoples and the land of the Algonquin, Anishinaabe Nation, and all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and their valuable past, present, and future contributions to this land. So before we get started, I just wanted to have a few housekeeping notes that I wanted to mention. This webinar will be recorded, as you just heard, and available on the electricityhr.ca website afterwards. You can use the chat feature today or unmute your microphone once we open the Q&A session to ask questions for Victoria, and we highly encourage it. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Victoria Miles, Strategic Partner at Vision Wheel. Respected for challenging leaders and their teams to examine their organization from a new point of view, Victoria knows what it takes to shape and deliver engagement strategies that actually move people. She's perfected the art and science behind long-lasting culture change with experience spanning every sector. As a strategic partner at Vision Wheel, she loves creating unforgettable employee experiences and memorable educational events, and you won't catch her without her clipboard. This I know from personal experience. Also of note, if you're currently an ERC member, Vision Wheel is part of our roster of partners for members, and you will receive a discount when using this and any of our partner perk services. So now let's get started. Victoria, I'm actually going to hand it over to you. Welcome.
Oh, terrific. Thank you. What a gracious, kind, and very long introduction. I really do appreciate that. And I want to jump right in because we have not too much time. So I am going to apologize though in advance because I actually speak fairly quickly. So you might want to go back and watch the replay after in case you feel like you might have missed something. But yeah, so at Vision Wheel, we really focus on 3 different areas with our clients. Employee engagement, which is like measuring and motivating and values exercises. We focus on employee experience, which is all the life cycle issues like onboarding, which as an aside has been a huge area of concentration. Organizations always looking for ways to become more focused on building in that whole area of belonging and also delivering onboarding in a virtual environment. And then of course our third area is around education, but bar none, employee education, like back that up, engaging employee education, I should say, has one of the area that's seen the most growth. This isn't just training. We really focus on tapping into areas of deepest need. So, most recently, we have been spending time helping leaders and their people thrive in this hybrid environment. And we've spent countless hours working directly with teams to help them get set up for the best possible start, and then counseling them along the way as they have struggled in trying to figure out what it means to lead a hybrid team. So I believe that's going to bring a really unique perspective to today, because what I'm sharing is what I provide to clients every day, all day. So it's not just theory, it's practice. And the ideas here should be fairly practical and applicable for you. I want you to leave with some concrete next steps. Really want to thank EHRC for this opportunity to speak into this very important area. It's a model that's getting a lot of attention. And as HR professionals, you probably saw the writing on the wall too. Long before maybe the CEO and the CFO did, you had your ear to the ground. You saw this seismic shift around employee empowering, right? This pendulum has swung. We are in a time that HR professionals have been arguably longing for, a time where organizations are truly, madly, deeply like listening to their people. I mean, heck, we've been working with a large property management organization who said that their people are directing their next real estate move. I was like, wait, what? Like, when did that ever happen? Like, ever? And add to that, we're entering, and maybe some of you argue we're already there, but we're entering the caring economy. Maybe that's a new term to you. And if yes, the caring economy basically argues that employees are looking to their workplaces as a source of genuine concern about their health, their wellness, their safety. And in this new economy, leadership is in the spotlight. Because if you truly care for your team, then you are going to find them to be more motivated, inspired, committed, and mentally healthy. And it also takes the shape of greater focus on upskilling and learning and development in particular. Now, if you joined, there was a really great little mini conference that LinkedIn put on called Forward. You may actually be able to get the replay. It's well worth the hour. But you'll know that learning and development are pretty much the keys to stemming the great resignation or great reshuffle or whatever it's going by these days. So this is the backdrop before we look at caring for a hybrid team. We have devoted ourselves to examining this from 4 different areas, and our training that we do with teams is unpacking these in detail. But in a nutshell, it's really around setting up teams for success, kind of understanding the pitfalls, managing conflict and accountability. And boy, there are different ways to handle conflict with hybrid teams, as well as trust in the hybrid workplace, which a lot of people are saying is kind of the backbone of what makes a great hybrid team. We also look at productivity and the heart that's attached to it. All of a sudden, productivity is tied to people's sense of meaning and purpose, which never had been before. And then the last is becoming emotionally intelligent hybrid teams. So that's kind of the way that we've been thinking about it in all these different dimensions. But we have very limited time. So we're going to drink from the fire hose together. I'm going to leave time for questions at the end, which is always my favorite part. So save me for questions. I love the hard ones. And if not, you can always connect with me afterwards. I've got my contact information here. You can take a peek. All right, so you're almost there, or you're there now, welcoming your teams back to the workplace, earning the commute, as they say. Have you heard that expression, earn the commute? Like, what is going to make the workplace different now than it used to be? What is going to take your employees and make them feel that sense of wanting to go back? How are you going to earn that commute, as they say? Finding ways to keep them engaged, on track, accountable, dare I say productive? All right, let's do some level setting. What is a hybrid? So a hybrid is something that's made by combining 2 different elements or a mixture. It could be the offspring of 2 plants or animals or different species or varieties, such as the mule. This is a hybrid of a donkey and a horse. Now, mules are one of the most commonly used working animals in the world. They are highly prized for their hardiness, their intelligence, their docile nature. Overall, they tend to be healthier and sounder and live longer than horses. And mules are less prone to injury because they've got a really good sense of self-preservation, which, if you're hanging onto the back of one on a cliff in Spain, you will appreciate. And fun fact, mules have good, strong feet, and so they don't require shoes. Now, while both are very strong, the mule has greater physical strength for its size and more endurance. So here you can see that this hybrid resulted in something stronger, more intelligent, more efficient, and highly prized. Isn't that how you'd like to describe your team? I think so. Now, don't go around calling them mules. Now, a hybrid team can take many forms: full-time co-located workers, full-time remote teammates, teammates who may be co-located on one day, flex as needed, co-located on specific days. But in general, I think some of the characteristics of your team will look like everyone else. There's difference in location, time, and task responsibility. And every organization is sort of saying the same thing right about now. They want to test and evaluate options to meet business needs, maximize employee experience, promote opportunities for connection, innovation that supports the insert company name goals. And most companies by now, and if you haven't, you should be probably surveying a lot. And hopefully, in that surveying, you're gathering that information on your people's expectations and needs regarding remote work and returning to work on site. And in that process, you may have, or you may be thinking about conducting, and maybe you should, if you haven't, job suitability assessments. Here you want to identify those best options suited to balance that on-site and remote work. Things like work duties, processes, operational outcomes, internal interdependencies. And for those of you in hybrid or maybe piloting, I want to give you this practical tip though, like survey. Okay, I can't see you all, but I can feel the eye roll. Survey, again, yes. But prepare your people in advance. Tell them you'll be asking them for their input, and then tell them to keep an ongoing record. Here are some questions you might want to be asking them to think about on an ongoing basis. Is my team meeting work goals? Am I? Is my team collaborating well? How is the level of commitment on our team? What do I feel? Do I feel more engaged? What am I noticing? How's my personal well-being? How's my team? What would I change? And the reason why this is a practical pointer is because I want you to prepare your people to be surveyed. One of the biggest mistakes we make is sending out the survey and assuming everyone's going to answer it the same way, but they don't. It'll be their worst day. It'll be the day when if you're in Ottawa, the LRT is not working. You know, it's taken you forever to get there. You forgot your indoor shoes, as if you need indoor shoes anymore, right? Like you forgot your indoor shoes, you've got your lunch, you get the survey, you're like, oh. And so you put 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, you know, in all these different areas. But then you could have the opposite effect. You could be, you know, everything was going well. None of your kids were sick. You actually made it to the office on time. You were all planning to go out for lunch. It was a sunny day. They get the survey and they're like, everything is awesome. And they fill it in. And then you think, oh, and you got 5 5s, 4 5 5s. Now, if somebody has their ongoing record, and it's as simple as a Word doc or even literally sticky note on their computer, just those little things, what are they noticing? And then you ask them in the survey, you're more likely to get a true response. You're more likely to get those notes of the things that went good and the things that weren't going so well. So survey, but prepare your people in advance for that. Now, common to all the models in hybrid, they all include this element of choice. And right off the start, the first thing you need to consider is that your mindset, your people's mindset around approaching the hybrid team model is really key. This isn't a decision. This is a change effort. So you must start with your mindset because that will help reframe the effort that will be required, and make no mistake. Hybrid requires effort, especially at the beginning, if you're going to see any benefit long-term. Now, I want to talk about change a little bit here because I want to be able to use this, something you'll be very familiar with if you've done any change management. I want to show you a tool, but I want it to be really practical for you because you're going to be going through a season of change and you want to care for your people. You're going to be thinking about how they adapt to change. Now, you've probably seen this before, as I said, especially if you've done any change management training, but this is the Kubler-Ross change curve. This was introduced in 1969. It's also known as the 5 stages of grief. It's a model consisting of the various levels or stages or emotions people experience by a person who is nearing death or a survivor of an intimate death. But what was interesting, and maybe this will be new for you if you really didn't know how it ended up in business, is that the model, after some experimentation, was held to be valid in a majority of cases and situations relating to all kinds of change. So in other words, it held true for people with cases of injury, disability, work issues, relationship, financial problems. And this model will be really helpful for you in this next change season. You can't be considering just improvements to your systems and moving to hybrid. You need to seek change in your people, because if your people persist in their old ways, all of the investment you made is going to go to waste. Now, leaders play a really important role. They need to support the employees in this process of making the transition, and that's going to include merit issues. So the easier it is for people to move along the journey on the curve, the quicker everyone will be back to functioning at that high level, because ultimately, that's part of the equation, right? We've come to expect this great level of performance from our mostly remote team, and now if we're honest, we're hoping that productivity is not going to wane, and we want to try out this new model. So I want to dive in a little bit further, because this is actually a practical tool, not just a theory. I want you to know and anticipate how people react in general to change so you can know and anticipate how to support your teams and how to have your leaders support their teams. All right, I've grouped this together to make it really simple and hopefully pretty speedy. Like I said, you're going to want to watch the replay, I'm sure, because we're going to go quick. So number 1, stage 1, you and your teams are potentially going through that first shock and denial. Many people not able to digest the fact they have to undergo this change and adapt to something new. Many people may need time to adjust to the changes and for a long time may deny they need any. Why can't I just work from home forever? That's all we hear. Here, it's helpful to over-communicate all your key messages to help them understand the why. Why are we doing this? What are the expected benefits? What is this going to look like? You'll see in this stage, over-communication is the theme, but please do not overwhelm your people. Many organizations, you might be one of them, you've circulated maybe a package that has a lot of Q&As. Most of them I've seen are no shorter than 30 pages. Q&As, lots and lots of detail, what to expect, how it breaks down, what the COVID protocols are. You know, Have your leaders and your managers just take that package and break it down for their teams a little bit. Guide their communication. Choose a few of those Q&As each week and include them in an email to the team. I can tell you, teams are not reading 30 pages, and when they are getting overwhelmed. Please, please break it down. Make your communication simple. Over communicate as much as you can, but I said don't overwhelm. Number 2, stage 2, the gravity of the situation settles in. The reality becomes clear. Hybrid is ultimately the workplace of the future. I'm here to tell you, if you don't already know, most organizations are moving in this direction. And in this stage of the curve, you may be there now, or you've traveled through this, you and your team may begin to feel fear from what lies ahead, and that can turn into anger and resentment. And you and your team have been in a comfort zone for a really long time. I'm just saying, some of you, even right now, are working in slippers. Knowing that your people need to learn and change and adapt and put on belts and shirts with buttons, that can make people feel angry and upset. So this stage has to be managed really, really carefully by you, because some people tend to vent their anger just a little too harshly. This is why so much planning needs to be done in advance if you can, taking time to think about everyone on the team and how they've adapted in the past. Practical suggestion here. Have your leaders, and if you're one of them, create a list of your team members, just a word or a piece of paper or your favorite clipboard. Write down each of their names, and then a quick note beside each one. How did I see them adapt to change in the past? What were their reactions? What did I have to know? What helped them? This is going to go a long way, because this is going to help you shortcut some of those things in going back and rediscovering or watching somebody go through it again. And you're thinking, okay, this is reminiscent of when we got sent home. What did I do last time? If you just have a little bit of foresight and do some of that planning in advance, it's really going to help you out. Okay, number 3, make room to explore. Now it's stage 3 here. This is when you and your teams finally start to embrace the change and realize how to adapt. This is the time when your team might try to find the best possible scenario to fit in and adapt and start experimenting. But what happens here, and if you've done grief counseling, this is when bargaining comes in. People bargain because they don't want to feel like they've compromised too much. You might get, can I bring my dog to work? Probably not. Can I work 10 to 6 a.m. to 1 to avoid traffic? Talking to your teams about what those options are. And you know what? You cannot rush this part of the process to learn quickly or adapt to change too fast. And you cannot expect 100% productivity during this phase. This experimental phase, this learning phase, it may not always be a very happy and comfortable zone for your team. And you know, you leaders, you might expect to see low energy due to dipping morale and excitement and getting worn down. Listen, if you've got kids, this is like being asked a million questions every day. Have you seen this meme? Yeah, this is me. This is how I feel some days. Once I became a parent, I finally understood the scene where Yoda gets so tired of answering Luke's questions, he just dies. You could feel yourself getting worn down during this phase. Now, stage 4, this is the stage everyone loves. Finally beginning to embrace the change, accepting the situation. People are building new hopes and aspirations. Maybe I do love a good podcast on that morning commute, or I didn't realize how much I missed, in my case, Planet Coffee, which is local, a little coffee shop. Everyone is realizing and understanding the importance of the change. And while some may accept it because they don't have any other option, others may actually accept the reality in a positive way, which is what you want, right? You should start to see your team showing improvements and the overall productivity starting to rebound. And I always say now's a great time to celebrate some small wins even. So really, really practically, send out that weekly check-in email, include a couple Q&As, write that list of team members, noting reactions of things that happened in the past, what helped, keeping an eye on your personal wellness. And then the last one, just as a kind of a fun little thing, celebrating maybe some fun, we call them like little fake awards. One of our clients did this. These were actual examples. They had a really fun time doing it. Not taking themselves too seriously in the beginning. There's a lot of stuff that's going on, but they were taking time to celebrate any small win they could. So they had these fun little motivational things where they had imaginary recognition awards, like matching socks for 5 days in a row. You'd be surprised when you're digging in your closet and you're like, I have to go back to the office. I need to find matching socks. Most coffee consumed in a day, or remembered their power cord and mouse award. Boy, oh boy, one of the big things, what you forget when you have to go back. Now, heading back to the workplace, and hybrid, or full-time, it is going to be scary for some of your people. It'll be a joy for others. And I've been comparing this workplace reentry to the experience of returning maybe from a mission trip or a humanitarian project. There's this initial culture shock when we go abroad. In our case, it was stay at home. And then there's the reverse culture shock, the return, the recovery, the reintegration. And so how can you minimize that shock? And the one thing I can suggest to you is that you want to normalize the change as much as possible. And that happens through preparation and communication. For example, in the early return days, and some of you may be in that phase now, in missions, we talk about pre-departure preparation and getting closure. And so as teams start to prepare for this return process, first, encourage that conversation around the things that they want to hold on to and the things they want to let go of. They might want to say goodbye to the dining room table, which has been their office for the last 22 months. They might want to say goodbye to the easy access to the refrigerator all day. This fun examples, but there will be things that they will want to move on from. There will be things they want to say goodbye to, and that will be part of the process of getting them ready to come back and really embrace this hybrid. But the second thing to remember is pay attention. Make sure you are picking up on all those cues from your team. You're offering more grace. You're looking for opportunities to intervene. The attitude that you hold is that everyone has permission to be okay with what they're experiencing in this adjustment phase. Now, there's lots of stats out there. Ipsos did a poll that showed 49% were comfortable and excited, with 51% reporting the opposite. And you know what, leaders? You're prone to think about the 51% a lot, but I would love to advise you, do not neglect the 49%. They are gold. If you are one of them and that's you, your contagious enthusiasm is high priority, because that will be part of driving that successful return to work. That will be part of the caring that is going to be required. Really, 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 really need that contagious enthusiasm. All right. So I hope that none of you are under the assumption that the hybrid will actually be an easier way to do business. The reality is, in the short term, we've got some mules that are going to need some pushing and pulling, right? That we're actually adding complexity. So we spend a good amount of time unpacking change. You should be getting the picture this will have some challenges. Now, I'm going to stop share here, and I'm going to just speak to the end of our time, and then look through the questions as well. And there's a really good question that's actually come up here. Thank you for asking about the inequalities and the fairness. I actually have something perfect coming up for that in just 1 second. So we've talked a lot about change and the variety of emotions. And one of the areas that deserves some special attention is around belonging. Part of keeping hybrid teams working seamlessly really involves a deliberate effort to ensure individuals from diverse backgrounds, experiences, and cultures really feel included. Loneliness will happen, and so inclusivity is even more important. And kindness and consideration, they are essential to mitigating loneliness and enabling inclusivity and belonging. I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that it has focused businesses on employee wellness, with, I would say, most top employers we work with are implementing explicit policies to boost not just morale and engagement, but also psychological and physical well-being. And the pandemic has really led to, I'm sure you would agree, a rapid evolution of human resources, growing urgency for what people are calling this reset. Remember that caring economy I mentioned earlier. And you probably know that the definition of a leader has expanded. Leaders now hold a greater responsibility to ensure that those they serve are well, not just well paid or well regarded. We cannot ignore what we have learned about our teams. Who they are outside of the office is critical. It's a critical part of who they are, period. And we now have this unique opportunity to invite the whole person back to the workplace. Make sure they feel not only they belong, but also they're cherished and they are valued for the whole person they represent. We've kind of masked ourselves, but unmasked our lives, and that is personal, it's emotional. Employees need to know they are valued even more today because we know them in a deeper way. We've seen more of their lives, and now we know we have more to offer, and they have more to offer than we ever realized before. But there's more, because in hybrid, we rely a lot on written communication as opposed to just working exclusively in the office where we've got face-to-face. Like, our teams not only have to collaborate on projects, but also they're responsible for building relationships and trust and rapport with their other colleagues, and they're doing it through a computer screen. I would argue that to build trust with a team, you need to understand how they express their emotions to others through all these various tools. But think about it when it comes to some of the other EQ basics like self-awareness and self-control and positive outlook and achievement and empathy and influence. When we're just behind a screen, we're missing out on some of these elements. Going into hybrid is going to get us back into a much more empathetic attitude. And when it comes to caring for your team, stress when working in hybrid manifests itself in very different ways compared to working exclusively in person. Instant messaging, heavy dependence on technology, people are getting overwhelmed by communications and overloaded. And in the office, we lean on our colleagues who are venting or conversations around stress triggers, which for some is a really great coping mechanism. In hybrid, it's important to find time to speak with colleagues, not only about work, but also how people feel about work. So the last thing I'll say on this is that working remotely, as you all know, means you live where you work. And when we work from an office, it can be easier to leave the office and stressors of the day behind. When we work at home, it can be more difficult to leave work at home because we're right here. Hybrid who straddle both, they need to find ways to switch off from work, from technology, and put the work situations aside to prioritize themselves and their responsibilities outside of work. I'm probably not telling you anything that's new here. I just want to remind you that hybrid is going to add a new dimension to this. Now, continuing down the emotion path, one of the last things I'll touch on in caring for your people is an area we've seen cropping up. Thank you for saying it, Andrea. Fairness. There are myriad issues linked to this one idea. Some are more obvious than others, like, hey, I'm in a role that can't work from home, yet my colleagues can. Or Jim and Sue, their team are on hybrid, but we're all remote and I want to jump teams. So I'm actually going to post a link into the chat to a really fantastic article. It tackles some of these thornier issues. I'm just going to put it here so everyone can see it. Please don't read it now, but please save it for later. And this really tackles things at a deeper level. I think this will be helpful for you, Andrea, as you're thinking about this, because it will go beyond just the sense that, some can and some can't. It really gets to the next level down. It describes that employees have different access to resources and different levels of visibility also with hybrid. And these two areas, resources and visibility, are key sources of power and influence for people. So it makes sense employees actually can feel threats, real and perceived threats to their mobility, to their status, to their growth. All right, we've covered a lot of ground. I know I'm out of time because I want to have time for questions, but just let me leave you with one more thing. I'm having a flashback of like a Ginsu knife commercial right now. Act now, receive the second set, bonus chop block. So here's the bonus gift, 3 very short guiding principles. Just remember, first, you need to remember that equal access to your people in hybrid does not mean the same. It's okay to say to your in-person team members, I'm going to have a meeting with each of you, and that's your time. But when you're in the office, those people can also still grab you at the coffee pot. They can bang on your door. They can see you in the parking lot. They can walk with you to grab lunch. Remote teammates might not have that same access. So the best practice is, remember, equal does not mean the same. Find ways to ensure remote people have the exact same feeling of access. Maybe it's virtual coffee pot at 15 minutes at 10 and 3, or holding some of that time is precious and important. So treasurable time. The second thing is, as a leader, it really is your responsibility to make sure there are appropriate opportunities for people to work anywhere. Now, unfortunately, a lot of this pertains to knowledge workers, people who are probably more prone to being in the office. I know there are field staff and other types. There's production facilities we work with, and they've got lots of things going on. But for people who you are straddling, who have office type responsibility or knowledge or computer type responsibilities, things where they have to be tied here, there are a few things worse than knowing an opportunity is really only geared for someone who has to be fully in the office or fully remote. So when you think about promotions and project opportunities, the best practice is take the extra step of trying to make them either universal or have a really good reason why they only work for somebody who's only in the office or only out of the office. And the last promise, in hybrid, work to avoid all those exclusionary opportunities. Now, this may be something you think is not important, but trust me, the all dreaded all team email. All team, we've got pizza, we're bringing lunch on Tuesday, or there's cake in the break room. That can leave people feeling excluded. And as a best practice, and this may happen, and that's okay, remember what signals you're sending. Pay really close attention to how you're creating inclusion. And trust me, if somebody on your team is making that world famous banana bread for your next meeting or training, I mean, not only consider inviting me along, but don't just have it show up in a virtual meeting. Everyone who's sitting around in the meeting room is yumming it up, and then they're looking on screen. The people on screen are like, I'm not getting virtual banana bread. All right, so thank you again. The fun part, your questions. I'm anxious to see what you've got to come at me, and I'm happy to stick around for as long as the questions come in. So thank you very much, and I look forward to answering them now.
Thanks, Victoria. So while people are doing that, I'm going to queue up one question for you. And that was like really insightful. Thank you very much. I learned an awful lot actually today from that. So at the very beginning, you talked about the employee survey. And so I had a question in regards to that, and it kind of goes back to Andrea's comment as well. What would be a best practice after you've actually done that engagement survey? Do you share the responses with the team? Do you actually go into action, or do you do a communication? And if you do a communication with the whole team, do you segregate it by audience? So field maybe versus the employees that are working in the office.
Good question. Let me think about that for a sec. I think as a best practice, actually, after a survey is deployed, oftentimes we hold or we recommend holding focus groups. And we do that to unpack the results with groups of employees, because sometimes you need to contextualize the results a little bit. You need to ask the questions as follow-up, almost like, what were you thinking when you answered this question? Not like, what were you thinking? But like, what were you thinking about as you answered this question? Can you provide some specific examples? And those focus groups, that time can be really constructive, because it can help formulate a better action plan than just relying on survey results themselves. So that's one thing I would say. And it doesn't have to be done by a third party. It can be done by somebody on your team. The second is, yes, absolutely share the results back. Normally, there's some sort of executive summary that's written around what it is you were trying to achieve. It's normally presented to teams in a variety of different ways and making those results accessible. But the reason why people fill in a survey in the first place, there's two reasons, right? One is that they think it's anonymous and confidential. And the second is that they think action's going to result. So if you tell them in advance that something's going to happen after, you better do whatever it is you said you were going to do after. And yes, sharing the results back, for sure, that would be a best practice.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So does anybody want to unmute their mic for a question? I'll leave that for now and see if there is anybody. We've got a quiet bunch here.
I can tell you one of the questions I get asked all the time about around this. As soon as I mention the word conflict, people say, ooh, like, why is conflict different in hybrid? And I can tell you that the nature of conflict in the workplace has changed significantly over the last, as we've been working virtually. The virtual environment has, well, let me just back up. There's two types of conflict generally, right? There's interpersonal conflict and there's task-related conflict, and both are going to happen in your team. The thing is that task-related conflict is usually very healthy and can be resolved. Interpersonal is much more difficult. In the virtual world, we've seen a rise in task conflict and a decrease in interpersonal, which is great. And that's happened because people are actually spending less time with each other. They're focusing more on the task. And so they're not interacting and creating interpersonal, but we have seen tasks kind of devolve into interpersonal. And so what happens in the virtual environment is that the urgency to resolve conflict has become lessened, significantly lessened, because we're not having that face-to-face contact. It's not like you and I have a disagreement and then I have to see you in 15 minutes at the next team meeting or see you at lunch. When we're virtual, you're off screen, you don't have to interact with them again. And so you don't have that urgency to resolve it or to follow up even on it really well. And in hybrid, the problem is that you'll always be struggling, or you can be struggling to find the best way to resolve it. Do we wait till we're in the office together? Do we try to do it on screen? The permutations of doing it on screen, right? So you've got leader in the office, 2 employees who are at home, or you've got 1 employee in the office with the leader, and then you got someone on screen. terrible. You've got all these different scenarios that can play out in how to even have the conversation just at a technical level. So hybrid does add a complexity around the area of conflict. And I get asked that one quite a bit.
Great, thank you. There is another question up on the chat.
Sure.
So it says, what are the best arguments to convince our executive committee about the need to prepare to come back to the office of our employees when they think it is not a big deal at all?
Oh my goodness. What is the best argument? I can't tell you. I mean, what is the best argument? That's good. You know what?
That is a good question.
It is. The funny thing is, like, we've been working with government agencies who have no plan to come back anytime soon, but still have the foresight to want to train their people. Like, I'm telling you, 4 half days of training around how to be a great hybrid employee, to major corporations and not-for-profits who are also, and leaders. We're doing lots and lots. Like, we're booked solid because people are seeing that if they don't prepare their people, then they're going to be in a world of pain. That, like, I don't know the best way to describe it, but you could point to some things like, you know, there's this thing called the Great Resignation that's happening. Like, you know, people have more choice. Employees are feeling more empowered than ever. Don't you think it would make sense for us to invest a little bit in preparing them for this re-entry? Oh gosh, I can't think. But as soon as this is over, I'm gonna have like 15 arguments in my mind. I'm gonna be like all fired up about what to say.
That's fine, you know, and if you do, we can share that with the participants.
Yeah, maybe
this session.
Maybe I'll do a LinkedIn post on this specifically. I was
great.
saying ahead of time that our whole month of June for Vision Wheel is going to be all around hybrid. So we've got a new paper coming out, a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. I have one other question as well. So you talked about, you had the image of Yoda up there and talking about questions and how somebody can get really worn out, which was a great analogy. Do you have any tips on how somebody could recover from that? Like, I mean, besides just the fact that you could just walk away and leave for an hour and then come back, is there any other tips that you could provide for everybody that's on the session today on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a number of different tools that you can use, just self-care tools that you can use. You know, and I think next week, in our next session, you've got somebody who's going to speak specifically to wellness as well.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
So there will be some tools that are introduced there. But, you know, my point is more just be aware of what is happening during that phase for yourself. You will have your own strategy, whether that's, you know, exercise or outlets or conversational, you know, therapies or, you know, stepping time away and things like. You'll have your own things. My point is just notice. Start by noticing what you're noticing in yourself. Are you getting more frustrated, resentful, angry? You know, are you noticing those things in yourself? And I think also, which is helpful, is asking your team to reflect back to you, right? It's giving them permission to say, oh, I have a great book. You know, this always happens. You know, giving people permission to say to you, I'm going to call you out on something that I'm noticing in you. Now, one of the areas that leaders are struggling, and this could be part of that, is trying to figure out what it means to be authentic. You know, we're throwing this around like, you mean authentic leader. It's like, well, what's that mean? This book, Why Should Anyone Be Led by You? It's a little bit older, and it doesn't necessarily talk about virtual or hybrid, but boy, oh boy, why should anyone be led by you? What it takes to be an authentic leader really breaks down some amazing, great stories you always love. Maybe you can get it as a podcast or something along those lines. But well worth the investment. I always say to leaders, don't leave it on your desk. You don't want your people saying, yeah, right, you should be reading that book. But you know, this talks to some of those things, like how do we find ways to communicate authentically with our team? How do we give them that permission to feed back to us when they notice we're not as, you know, happy or engaged or whatever that is. So.
Okay, great, thank you. And I know that somebody had just made a comment on that last question. I understood to bringing up the risks of not doing it. Thank you. Fantastic. So I'm going to, actually, I think I'm going to wrap this up. So I'm just going to share my screen once again because I love this picture. Uh, so I want to thank Victoria very much so, and all the participants today. If you would like more information as a valued member and how to benefit from some of these partner perks, please get in touch with me at one of the email addresses listed here. And you can also stay informed with future webinars and any of our resources by signing up for our newsletter on the electricityhr.ca website.